welcome to the Now You Know Destiny podcast. I am VulshokBersrker, and I am joined by Hip,
Hello.
LostAngelofHavik.
Yo, what's up?
Okay. We will be explaining the timeline of Destiny starting from when the Traveler arrived. A little unorthodox. People usually start at the Books of Sorrows, but not us. We're special. Hip, you want to start us off at the beginning?
Sure. So we're going to start with the Golden Age, Traveler arriving in the Sol system. So whenever the Earth powers saw the Traveler come in, they immediately got to work on the Ares project to send a group of astronauts to Mars to see the Traveler with their own eyes. Wasn't anything known about it previously. They just saw it enter the system and decided that they wanted to go see it.
I believe it first arrived, they first saw it at least by Jupiter.
Yep. And then by the time they were able to see it stop, they at Mars, they kind of knew, well, this thing isn't leaving anytime soon.
Yeah. It was interesting because it had the abilities, like, it teleported. They described it as blinking, but it wasn't, like, instant. It would disappear for months at a time and then reappear in a new planet.
Yeah, and given the later developments of transmat in Destiny, which is basically moving material from one place to another without any visible communication stream, it's kind of implied through the lore that we learned how to, I guess, bend space that way from the Traveler.
That would make sense.
Never made that connection.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make complete sense.
Okay. So Ares won after I did the math. It was the 564 days with a 14th month one-way trip to Mars. They met the Traveler. The Golden Age started.
And this was in 2014. At least that's the common theory, since that's when
The game started.
Destiny came out.
So that was changed. It was present day for D1 when it said opening video said present day, but later on Bungie said it was specifically nearing the end of the 21st century. So like 2190.
Oh,
or
damn.
2090.
Yeah, it'd be
Damn.
2090, yeah. That's
Okay, that makes sense. Wow.
Okay.
So you would probably just, I mean, minimum estimate, I'd say add 70 years to the timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To today, 2019,
Roughly.
we'll put it at 2089.
So anyways, humans arriving on Mars, what did they see there?
Well, they described it as they expected to land on a pretty barren place. The Ares 1 craft was only made for light winds, but they described it as falling down with a storm building around them, because the Traveler was terraforming the planet.
Yes, that implies a pretty sudden atmosphere, which is something obviously Mars does not have right now.
Right.
Yes.
If you go watch that opening sequence, there's actually a longer version of that opening cinematic for Destiny 1, and you can see just the climates cycling through on Mars, and it's really pretty to watch. Great job with the animators there.
Oh yeah, when they arrived at the ridge we see in the cutscene, I believe Captain Hardy described it as you could feel the air enrich with oxygen around you. So it was a very sudden change. The Traveler don't mess around. But as we said, this is the start of the Golden Age. Since the Traveler went to other places, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, they went back to Titan no, not that. It went back to Jupiter for the moon of Io, where it stayed for quite some time. But Venus became a jungle world. Mercury grew life. It was a garden world, and Mars. Did they really describe how Mars' environment changed? Like to what?
If I remember correctly, the only things that were observed that were added were an atmosphere and a rotating climate. So I don't know that life was really added.
So the desert still existed.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, you suddenly had great expanses of ice and stuff like that. So the air density definitely rose there.
I can see that. Well, there was a ghost fragment, the Golden Age. He also described how Earth's environment was renewed. The pollution was no longer a problem, so global warming kind of stopped being a thing.
Come on, guys, we gotta use politically correct terms. Climate change. It's like, let me stop.
Well, let's see.
Here's to a healthier Earth.
Technically
in the world of Destiny.
Before the Golden Age started, because we see in Curse of Osiris that the Vex arrived on Mercury when Traveler was terraforming it. So that was technically before the Golden Age started by human standards. The Vex were already in the system.
It's kind of like having roaches.
And we have no real date for this. But Ahamkara
Destiny
arrived
likes
as well.
to be a little vague with their dates. I think it gives it a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to lore, or if they want to.
Absolutely. I mean,
and I don't mind that at all.
Nah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that given how expansive the story of Destiny is, I think when you add solid dates, especially with things that predate so much stuff in the game, on one hand, it can get a little problematic when you're trying to pinpoint what happened when you have multiple events that I'm sure we're going to be going into, so I don't want to name anything yet, but I think it's definitely but I mean, I definitely feel like the vague I think it's safe to say that going into Destiny and stuff, they had a plan, and of course they crafted the lore around this plan, and ever since then it's been a ever evolving vision.
Yeah.
We can move on further into the Golden Age because we have no real time for how much this happened. I think we can assume the earliest next date was kind of like a crunch time, because Clovis Bray was founded, infamous Clovis Bray, founded by what I believe would be considered Clovis Bray II, because I believe his father's name was Clovis Bray, and the first was alive before the Traveler arrived. So that means the second Bray grew up during only experiencing the Golden Age and built the Clovis Bray Foundation.
Yeah, I actually wonder about that, because you start to see kind of like technological dynasties, like the Brays passing down their company through their family, or even weapon manufacturers.
It's interesting because human lifespan tripled.
Yeah, so you really
Age.
have much more of an opportunity for this sort of dynasty business model.
But it's interesting. Say, for example, Clovis Bray the First doesn't have a kid until later on in the Golden Age, and then the second grows up, founds Clovis Bray, and then they invent Glimmer and the Engram by encrypting this matter.
Yeah, programmable matter.
Mm-hmm. And then that could be 200 years already in the Golden Age.
True.
So, and then with lifespan tripled, had another 300 years onto that, and that's a pretty long Golden Age with just the same guy heading the company.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
and that's
you'd
just
have to make the research stations that we see on Titan and Destiny 2.
Yeah, I mean, Titan,
he was everywhere.
The Futurescape on Mars, just the like you said, the construction alone on things like that probably took decades. And then, of course,
Yeah.
the technologies that sprang forth from the golden age. Like you mentioned, Glimmer and Engrams. There's the EXO project. There's Rasputin. There's a lot of things that I think would almost be preposterous to say, like, oh yeah, this happened in like 10 years. All this. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, Rasputin alone had a network that could monitor the solar system in its entirety in like
Right.
real time.
With the Warsat network, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Right, and weapons.
Yeah. So
Right.
to make that alone, there's it's impossible to say how much time passed for the golden age.
At least the framework for Rasputin is theorized to have been crafted before the Golden Age.
Yeah,
Right. The
as,
mind for Rasputin, I think, was described as it's alluded to and teased that Rasputin was in very, very, very early stages of development during the Ares 1 mission.
Well, the interesting thing was that I'm not going to pronounce her name. I'm just going to call her Dr. M from the Ares 1 because her last name is very confusing. She built it. The subroutine was, she called it R, and it was making its own code like 70 years from now. That's impressive.
Right.
And then
That's the dream.
More than likely, she was involved in the Rasputin project because Willa was part of it, and Anastasia Anna Bray, she just taught him.
Yeah. And with that, you were able to kind of slingshot humanity into the EXO project, giving them bodies after what their biological deaths would normally be, furthering that whole idea of just perpetuating your knowledge and your vision for especially these wealthy business people.
Oh yeah. But it was never, when the EXO project started, it was never. I don't think they ever tested on transferring human consciousness until much later. They wanted to make sure
it was
the
later for sure.
machinery was good.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see this similar vein of logic follow through from the people who I guess are outliving their own projections.
Yeah,
right.
300 years old.
Yeah, ideologically and
not a full
physically.
Yeah, like
I
you're
gotta
just sitting
live
there
longer.
like, what can I do today?
Yeah, I've already.
Well, I'm gonna
lived
die
300
soon. Maybe I should
years.
just figure out how. Maybe I ain't got shit to do. Maybe I should just put my brain in a robot body. Yeah,
why don't I
that
just
sounds like a great idea.
add another 1,000? It's no big deal.
Why not?
And that in itself caused some problems because they discovered the dissociative exomind reduction problem,
Right.
which was that the human mind couldn't handle a robotic body. So Clovis Bray had him find a workaround. After the transfer, they wiped previous memories and they programmed in human traits like needing to eat, sleep, drink, non-alcohol, that kind of stuff.
Cade.
Cade, he was
Eat, sleep, drink,
loves his
Cade.
spicy ramen.
I feel like that's
Which is interesting because Cade was human back in the Golden Age. He was a gambler, and then something fell through. He owed a lot of debt to Clovis, and they told him he could clear that debt if he went to the EXO program, and he became an EXO, which would be considered Cade 1. Which I believe
Rest
he
in
would have to
peace.
go to the Deep Stone Crypt, which is shrouded in so much secrecy.
One day there will be a raid there. I'm calling it.
Oh, raid?
There definitely.
Oh,
Rasputin
man,
controlled Exos back in the Golden Age, so that means we might have to fight Rasputin there.
Or Siva.
I mean,
Siva
it
could
would
come back
really
again.
be cool to fight Guardian-styled opponents.
I would
like
love
Guardian
to
style
fight
AI.
dark
That would be
Guardians.
so cool. Yeah, that would be cool.
We
I
all
mean,
do. And technically we're gonna, because what happened in Shadowkeep, which we're not going to talk about this time, It's kind of like that. But anyways,
Yeah. Dot dot dot.
dot, 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 dot.
Yeah.
Let's
So
put
what's
put a
next?
pin in
So
that.
we got
We'll come
over
back.
exos. So I guess the next thing to move on to, the next big technology item that came from the golden age, was the invention of SIVA.
Yes.
Glimmer, but better. That's the marketing tagline.
Yes.
Glimmer,
Yes.
but better.
I believe it was Dr. Zhang described it as pushing matter encryption to the next level. They could not only program what the matter was, but tell it what to do.
Yeah, so you'd have these colony ships like the Exodus series going out to, other planets and stuff, and not even taking what we would consider as supplies today. They would just take a load of SIVA, and they would program it into shelters or tools or vehicles or whatever they needed to, because that's the level of programmable matter that they were at that point.
I'm calling
and the
it-
interesting was it had no battery, so it would never die.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling it now that, like, out of all the technology that, like, comes out of, like, sci-fi anything this day and age, SIVA's one of those things that the minute something similar in real life gets, like, proposed like that, I'm gonna be like, no, nah, we good.
Yeah, but we're that way with like
itself.
any kind of AI because of Skynet. But we have
I mean,
an Alexa.
we have Rasputin, so clearly we did not learn anything from Skynet.
Programmable,
Clearly.
mobile nano-tech is always going to be a danger. Because that even, just a small tangent, that just
But it sounds so
totally
cool.
invalidates even biological warfare at that point, because it's
Yeah.
mobile. You can seep through anything, you can cut through anything with it. It's kind of the perfect tool and weapon. It's
Yes,
the Iron Lord's
and I want it.
Nah, man. I'm good. Don't need
Unlike
SIVA in real life.
Unlike real life nanobots, Ziva had a problem. You could call it a problem. If you coded it poorly, things would turn out bad.
Yeah,
Like,
assimilate
like-
everything and view bad.
Yeah, yeah. Kill all the Iron
Rasputin
Lords
saying,
bad.
"Oh, these guardians must want the smoke, then take everything." Bad.
Oh yeah. So because of that problem, some mishap, disaster happened, and Clovis Bray kind of shut it down. But Rasputin still used it because he's smarter than Clovis. Anyways, that's a for another time.
So like we said earlier, the Vex were kind of in the system before any of this started going on. And about this time, humanity's gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, we have a good handle on the things we didn't understand, however many hundreds of years ago. Let's try to tackle another one. And so they started the Vex experiments, and that was done by the Ishtar Collective.
Mm-hmm. Not the website.
Baxter was the one who did.
Yes. Baxter was the one. Yeah,
He's
usually
led that
behind the
team.
Vex.
Baxter discovered the Vex.
Yes, but the interesting thing is, there were runes appeared on Venus that predated humanity, and it was Vex in nature. So the Ishtar Collective was founded to experiment and research it, and the Ishtar team captured a Vex goblin and somehow isolated it from the Vex network, which is an impressive feat unto itself.
Yeah, you're talking about machines that can talk through space and time, and they just disconnected it from its gateway. That's just, wow.
It's impressive. Especially since the milk itself is the Vex in a certain sense. They're not really relying on the robot part. They're relying on their biological nature part. They somehow stopped it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But they couldn't stop it completely. They discovered that the goblin was simulating every member of the Ishtar team perfectly down to the microsecond.
Yep.
Imagine not knowing if you're the real one.
Yes, because you're
Right.
looking at a monitor and it's simulating everything perfectly. No lag. At first you would think it's just a recording, but how is it getting that angle? There are no cameras in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that just really speaks to the Vex's control over their own spaces and what they can accomplish within them, like the Infinite Forest.
Which is ultimately which makes them very, very high tier in terms of them being dangerous.
Yeah, like how do you beat an enemy that's already
Goes
fought
on
you?
Yeah. They just go on forever.
It knows you more than you know yourself.
Right. Like, I mean, I remember when I first started, like, you know, because like, the Hive have always been my favorite species and stuff, but in terms of enemies in Destiny. But I remember when I was first started getting into the lore and I started reading about the Vex and everything, and I just thought to myself, like, every incursion we had with the Vex, I'm like, they can literally erase us, and we fight them like we're crazy. Like,
they can't. They can't erase it from
Right.
reality outside
Of course.
the Volta class. So
Because
we're
of
safe.
Of course.
At least in
Guardian
reality.
causality and oh yeah, and for those that are new, if there are any that are listening, paracausality is just Destiny's fancy way of saying that you make your own fate.
Yes.
Another being cannot remove you from time and space, sort of.
and we ourselves can call things into existence.
Yeah, we can push the flow of fate and reality in the direction that we choose.
Yeah,
Exactly.
There was always that theory that everything in the universe is predetermined, not for Guardians.
Yes,
Right.
that's where the Guardians make their own fate saying comes from.
Right.
Yes.
We ourselves exist as a, I guess, an
As
oddity.
Singularity, if you
nature.
will.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Singularity is a good way of putting it because, you know, we are our own force of nature. Like, you know, just our abilities, grenades, all the way down to the rifts,
All the
our
life.
supers, everything that we use when it comes to the light. It's literally coming out of nowhere. We're just summoning this power, which is
There's a few theories
something
on
that the
we'll come
Vex,
to later.
right?
But unlike Guardians, the Ishtar team didn't have that ability, so they were extremely paranoid. They couldn't really decide if they were real or not, so they decided there was only one way to figure it out, and that was to call in a war mind. The only thing they believed the Vex could not simulate.
And they were right. The Vex can't.
This is true.
Yeah.
Our
is
light and the
interesting.
Warmind are just two of the very few things that Vex cannot simulate.
Mm-hmm. So they used Rasputin to free themselves from this trap. And there were 277 or 227 versions. 277?
227.
Yep,
227. There were 227 copies of the Ishtar team, and they all made the same decision to cancel it and look into the Vex network for information.
So that's all of those scientists into the Vex network to see what they can find.
Mm-hmm.
I should also we should also make a note.
Chioma?
This is
Chioma. That's
Chioma
how I've always said it.
and Maya Sundaresh were married? They're married at the time?
I know that they were together. I don't know if they were married.
Yeah.
I think they were lovers, but I don't think it was explicitly said like
Okay.
if their relationship went
Okay.
beyond
Yeah.
that. Like
I believe
if they
it was
had any titles.
Sundaresh kept in contact with one of her copies after the Ishtar team split up from this incident. And she later went on to found the Future War cult near the end of the Golden Age. Which means the FWC is very old.
Superior faction? Anyone?
We're not getting into that. We're not getting into that.
All right. So, I guess next order of business.
It would, yeah. Hive worms on the moon.
Yes, because it's haunted.
Yes, which we can't talk too much about because it's been explained in Shadowkeep more. So we're just going to say that
And the Books of Sorrow.
In the Books of Sorrow, a team of researchers on the moon, on the old D1 map of First Light, found tunnels under the lunar surface. And when they researched and looked into these tunnels, they accidentally found their way into the Hive tunnels. They found the Chamber of Night and the Circle of Bones, and they were all murdered. The end.
Yeah, that was a bad Thursday.
Yep.
Man, yeah, not too long after that, the darkness, or what an anomaly, was detected outside the system. And this anomaly was first detected by Titan, the research facility on Titan. They sent a deep space probe to check out for information. And then along the way, or they sent it to Rasputin, learned of it, and then went into war mode.
Yeah, Rasputin essentially did every calculation it could to figure out how to properly combat this looming threat that was coming. And at the same time, Henrietta, along with two of her friends, Helga and Yuki, became the founders of what we now know to be the Black Armory. Which is a organization and specialized group that came together to create very powerful weapons to, again, combat what was coming, because no one knew.
Yeah.
They just wanted to be prepared.
She had connections, and she learned of the anomaly before a lot of people did, so that's why she made the Black Armory, to prepare for it. And while her and her two friends were building up the Black Armory, Rasputin was collecting every weapon in the system under himself.
Yep.
There was one I love the name of, called the Aurora Knives. His most powerful weapon.
From my time.
What it does, nobody knows. All we know is when the darkness came and Rasputin shot it, it bounced off, basically.
Oh.
Huh.
Well.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Rasputin was probably
everything Rasputin threw at the anomaly did nothing. And I mean, there's a very big controversy that for a time was that Rasputin used the Aurora Knives to damage the Traveler and force it to stay here and defend. But its protocol was never activated. So Rasputin never injured the Traveler, and the Traveler voluntarily chose to stay and defend.
Yeah, actually, I think in Warmind we got some lore that pretty much just shut that theory down.
Oh yeah. It killed any leftover debate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was that the Traveler chose a position. I think the Traveler, from my understanding, chose to make it stand where it is now.
Yeah, because we saw the anomaly. Exodus starts going because everyone's like, hey, we need to get off this planet. We don't need to be here whenever this shows up.
Not everyone knew about it, though.
Yeah, that's true. It was
like a select few
project.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And we saw it. So we know that the Traveler did too, and it purposely leaves Io and comes to Earth before the darkness arrives in the system. So that
in
that
the European area at the time.
Yeah, that there just kind of shows that that's wrong. That the Rasputin would have shot the Traveler.
There was a lot of unrest at the time. People were questioning. And then the darkness arrived. Around this time is when everyone started funneling towards the Cosmodrome, trying to get off on an Exodus ship.
Yep.
But the darkness came too quickly. It decimated the solar system, forced Rasputin into hibernation because it prioritized saving itself.
Which brings us to the collapse.
Oh, yeah. This is the beginning of the collapse right here.
So,
which
oh, go ahead.
okay, which it started out like the collapse wasn't just boom happened. It was kind of a
Yes.
set of events that cascaded very quickly.
Yes.
Like the Nokris, the son of Oryx, arrived with Zol, the worm god, onto Mars. Rasputin, I don't quote me on this, but I believe he couldn't stop him for the moment, so he ignited Aurora. I don't want to say the word
Palisade.
Palisade, and froze the faction of Nokris in the polar caps of Mars, so we could fight them a
Deal with
later
them
day.
later, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I mean, it's presumed afterwards this event happened that the darkness was in the system. So on its way, it met Exodus Green.
Otherwise known as the Yangli Way.
Yes.
For those who don't know, this is the society that would later become what we know as the Awoken.
Yes. The anomaly, the darkness, probed the Exodus ship, kind of like it poked the systems, the people, looking at them, monitoring them.
Yeah, and I
Didn't
think it's
do anything to them though.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that Exodus Green was a little different from the other Exodus ships. Exodus Green wasn't leaving Earth because solely for the Darkness's arrival. It also was leaving because it didn't want to have to be bound to the Traveler. Its passengers thought that the Traveler was a crutch that humanity didn't need. And so they left for that reason. So whenever they tell the Darkness, we have no connection to Earth, we are our own society, they really do mean it. They didn't want to be a part of Earth and the Traveler anymore.
Well, I mean, I mean, when I read it, it seemed to me more so like, I mean, they quite possibly could have felt that way. It just seemed to me more like that decision was a logical deduction by the captain, because I think they took a vote, to as to whether they or not they were going to abandon all their ties to Earth, or if they were going to just wing it.
Yeah,
I mean, you can even see that in Awoken culture.
They sent out a signal telling whatever was scanning them that we are not connected to the Traveler. Your business with it is your business. Please leave us out of it.
Right.
And it did. It didn't kill anyone and continued its quest towards the inner solar system. And this is where Rasputin steps in and tries firing back.
Yeah. He activates Yuga Sundown, where he cancels all protocols to defend the human civilizations in the system, and he puts all his submines, so like people like mines like Charlemagne, they all go into standby mode. Core gets isolated on Mars after he does the big freeze, and he basically hides himself in his own technology, which is a good amount of forethought considering how technologically advanced the Scions were whenever they arrived on Mars. So,
and he also kind of fragmented himself in the process.
So the Cosmodrome version of Rasputin we talked to in D1 is not part of the main controlling consciousness of Rasputin that we meet in Warmind.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a smaller copy of himself, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would wager a more unstable version.
Agreed, yeah.
Much more unstable.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that later. And I guess either anticipating or in response to this darkness, the Traveler was starting to move across Earth. And when it was over the European area is when the darkness hit it, causing it the lower part of it to shed. And then it falling to the surface. And this is what we call in the game now the European Dead Zone. And then the Traveler continued on, I believe, I would say attacking back but not stopping it. And it stopped what we currently think is South America, based on a group of guys doing research on the plant life, skybox, all this stuff.
The skybox points to Nepal.
Does it?
Yeah, there's actually there's really good arguments for both. Like you can even follow up the flora and the fauna with, well, the Earth changed whenever the traveler got into proximity, but you can say, oh, but we know that Hawthorne flew across the ocean to get to the traveler. So like there's a whole bunch of evidence for both.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is interesting.
Right.
Oh yeah. And I guess during this fight between these two great powers, there was a turning point where the Traveler decided, "That's my final stand." And this was the first great wave of light radiated across the system, pushing the darkness back, and in a very probably painful way, collided with the Exodus green ship, merging with the darkness in all of the passengers' bodies and throwing them into a pocket universe where the Awoken were born and lived out millions of years.
Correction.
What?
It was the collision of light and dark created a singularity, and it was actually Mara who she went out of the ship in a pressure suit and dove into the singularity, and then the ship, because it was in such close proximity to the singularity, also got sucked into it. I wanted to just clarify language wise.
And she was also the first Awoken to wake.
Right.
And using, I believe, if I remember correctly, using her power, she defined the pocket universe, kind of shaped it in her image.
Which is also a very long story for another time.
Millions of years long. The pocket universe had an accelerated timeline. Millions of years happened inside, hundreds happened outside.
Gotcha.
But the other Exodus ship, Exodus Black, crashed on Nessus during this time, and all of the crew was killed by the Vex, leaving the ship AI failsafe alone.
And also around this time is also when the Vex began to turn Mercury from a garden world into a machine world, which is what we now see in game.
Yes, they took that moment to create the Infinite Forest, a reality engine, to run simulations to find their perfect outcome for the universe. And during all this collapse, Henrietta, who founded the Black Armory, was being attacked by people in fear of what was coming and what happened. And her daughter was injured by one of these raids.
Fatally so.
Yeah, fatally. So to save her daughter, she turned her into Exo, much to her, I would say, regret and dismay. She hated Exos.
Right. And the only way this is even possible is that one of the co-founders of the Black Armory was a former employee of Clovis Bray. So they were familiar with the Exo project and understood how the technology worked for that to even be possible.
Oh yeah. And they turned her into Ada-1. I would say she's a more improved model of the Exos, given that she's lived 500 years and hadn't had a reset yet. But she had a very special ability compared to all of the other Exos.
Yes, she was built and designed with the ability to essentially be a walking forge.
Yeah.
So,
thanks to the Obsidian Accelerator, which enhanced the weapons she created.
Yes. In turn, making them more powerful, much more powerful.
Yes. And sadly, during a time of confusion, fear, and mass panic, people saw this power, and some of the first risen light bearers, who we would one day be considered a guardian, found the Black Armory people and saw the power of 801 and wanted the accelerator for himself. So he hunted 801 and her mother for years around the world until he killed Henrietta.
Yep.
Sadly, Ada was probably maybe a decade old at that point, still very curious, because she was just a child when she was turned.
She was adept enough, though, with the technology of the weapons of the armory to avenge her mother. As Henrietta sacrificed herself so Ada could escape. Did she escape with the accelerator, or did Henrietta have that on her? I don't want to.
To my knowledge, she did not have the accelerator. She lost the accelerator at some point.
Yeah.
Because we returned it to her.
Right. Okay. So yes. So she sniped the Risen who killed her mother.
Yes.
Sniped him and his ghost.
Ghost first, I believe.
2 shots, clean.
Mm-hmm. One on the ghost, one on the guardian.
Mm-hmm.
Dead.
Gone.
And this kind of forces us into the Dark Age, where ghosts were reviving people, and without the founding of the city or the structure of the Vanguard, kind of abused their power.
I mean, I've always looked at this as I guess I almost kind of expected, just due to the nature of just human nature, just because we're very you strip us of our identities and stuff and put us kind of in an animalistic state, which I can only imagine that the entire solar system was kind of in at that point. It's just kind of survive or die kind of days. Well, I can only imagine it that primal instinct of survival can easily turn the greatest of intentions into power hungry.
Well, the Risen, where they had no memories when they woke up, because no Risen does, but they did have their ghosts. But it's not really made clear if a ghost had like a more the justice moral compass we see now, because
even the Drifter's ghost was it punched through a driver that was barreling down on him.
It was another Risen.
With just his shell.
I don't know. That's awesome.
Punched through him, just ran right through him.
Okay. Yeah, I would say theoretic, like from a completely theoretical place, just from the different ghost stories I've read, and I was reading some newer stuff today that I won't go into detail, but I find that specifically probably the best example being the Drifter's ghost. I think that the ghosts most at best match us in
I was hoping you'd say that.
Probably the purest way. Like they talk about soulmates, but I think with ghosts it's a little bit deeper than that. I think ghosts match us in terms of our true intentions.
Agreed.
Like how
the purest form
Osiris
of
and Sagira play off each other a lot.
Exactly.
Cora and Ophiuchus.
How we're silent
our
for
ghost.
most of the game, and our ghost just is a chatterbox.
On the opposite sense,
right?
Lord Shaxx is the loudest man, and you have never even seen his ghost.
Right. You know, I do wish there was some more interactions in game, like, you know, Segura and Osiris, because I do think that gives a great insight as to Ghost. But I think one of the greatest additions to Forsaken was Ghost Stories, because it's really kind of nice to see. I always kind of enjoy reading the Ghost perspective on their guardians and stuff. I find that very interesting.
But speaking of like Risen who abused their powers, they gained a title called Warlords. It's not all of them were bad. They controlled territory, they protected the people, but most of them put like a mafia style charge, like territory or what do they call it?
They staked their
Tax.
claims. It was like a feudal lords.
Yeah. They
If
ran
you-
territories and had armies of other Risen.
If you didn't give them tributes, they would burn your village.
Tribute, that was the word I was looking for.
Yes. And one of the good warlords, to our knowledge, is Lord Shax.
I mean, and given
He's been
how
alive
loud
since
he
the
is
Dark
and
Age.
the horns, I mean, can you really? You can see
He looks
it.
good in it.
You
Come
can
on, guys!
definitely
Come on,
see it.
guys! Let's not
good in it.
disrespect. Let's not disrespect Lord Shax here. We all know Warlord has too many syllables.
Is that a criticism of Titans or Shax?
No.
I'm
it's-
just simply Hey, listen, that is some of the best writing I have ever read. Like, just the Arbalest lore tab is
great.
amazing.
It's great.
So, what's your Warlord?
Shax is
Warlord
always a
has
treat.
too many syllables. Yes.
In
Yeah, that was
response to these warlords came the rise of the Iron Lords.
Basically, Risen who desired order and peace.
Yes, I would call them the Proto Guardians.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Iron Lords are probably I think they were
naive.
guardians before. They were definitely naive, but they were definitely guardians before they kind of knew before the concept arose. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like, I think, a bunch of people who were just sick of the bloodshed. You know, I mean,
If the City Age had the same environment as the Dark Age, the Guardians today would be exactly like the Iron Lords then.
mm-hmm.
But they were reckless. During the fights between them and the warlords, they got a lot of innocent people in the crossfire.
However, they did pave the way for actual organization and refuge in the future.
Yes.
Without them, there would be no city. There would be no inspiration to be a guardian.
This is true. To play devil's advocate, though, I will point out for the record, and this is more so for, again, New Light players, the warlords and the sheer violence and the conflicts that arose between the warlords and the Iron Lords and the innocents that got caught in the crossfire. Specifically, those innocents is the basic reason why Drifter feels the way he does about being a guardian and guardians at large.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't trust the Traveler. He doesn't trust ghosts. The general tenets of being a guardian he finds to be absurd.
Oh yeah. He watched an entire village he hid at burn because of a fight of Iron Lords and Warlords. And he wanted revenge.
Yeah, bloody time.
Oh yeah.
He wanted the only thing I had a problem with that is just the fact that I think, and I think it speaks perfectly to the Drifter's character. Is I think the Drifter's character is a good example of accountability or lack thereof, and the importance of it, because his ghost literally says to him, "You could have saved them all." And literally all he says in response, I'm paraphrasing here, but his response is basically like, this shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
He is right.
This
Yeah,
is true.
no, he has a point.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, everything the Iron Lords did wasn't terrible. To me, they kind of,
Worked with what they had.
yeah,
Right.
but they were also an inspiration to most, because we have the Takomi Rangers. They guided people to the Traveler.
Takonomi.
Takonomi
Yes.
Rangers. They guided people to the Traveler, protecting them from fallen and bandits. But the interesting thing was, they were not risen, they were not light bearers, they were just people protecting people.
Yep. Actually, if I remember correctly, there is a member in the tower who was aided in getting to the city by these people. I don't remember who at the moment.
There's a lore tab from a ship, which is the head of the Daito.
Right.
She was a member of.
There you
She
go.
was a member of the Rangers, and the reason why the Daito logo is a white flower on blue background is because when a ranger would fall, they would have a trail of blue flowers they planted along their path. So even after they died, the flowers would guide people to the city.
Pretty inspirational group.
Oh yeah. I mean, if they took any inspiration from the Iron Lords, it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think they're the only non-Guardian group who ever did anything like that.
At least the only ones that we know of in lore.
Yeah.
I mean, Hawthorne seems to be a remnant of that idea.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
I don't
So I
really
think
know
we
of any active groups like that still.
Now, as much as we have gone into detail in regards to the Risen and the human, or rather humanoid on humanoid violence that was witnessed and experienced by many during the Dark Age, because it was definitely a bad time. Also, we had the Fallen who arrived in the system, who were, I want to say, jealous of humanity, and also in a bad state of existence as they were, because they had literally lost their entire system to a event similar to our collapse known as the Whirlwind. And while we will be covering Fallen history in a later episode, they arrived in our system as pirates, and also to try to gain back the Traveler's favor, or to take it back by any means necessary.
Oh yeah.
So then we had to deal with them in addition to the Risen.
So
They
alien
called
pirates.
it the Great Machine.
Yeah. So alien pirates, a broken atmosphere.
Superpowered humans.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Immortality. Yeah. No, it's a great recipe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What else would come up from jealousy?
Yeah. So Dark Age, everybody. When Destiny goes dark, it goes dark.
It does. Yes, it does. I mean, if you want to talk about dark, we got the Ziva crisis now.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. So during the time of the Iron Lords, I believe it was Lord Fellwinter discovered Ziva and Rasputin, the fragment of Rasputin that was in the Cosmodrome, and they wanted to use Ziva to help people grow a city. But yeah, it didn't turn out very well.
Like Vul said earlier, wrongly programmed Siva is not a good thing to have around.
Yes.
And when that Siva is controlled by a unstable fragment of a very powerful and
Well, they don't. I mean, in the Dark Age, do we know exactly that Rasputin was the one controlling all of Ziva? I thought Ziva was just going rampant.
No, so from my understanding of what I've read, I believe that Rasputin, when Fellwinter and Rasputin spoke, again paraphrasing, basically Rasputin did not like or pick up what Fellwinter was trying to put down, and took his words as disrespect, and Rasputin, or at least this fragment of Rasputin, unleashed the power of Siva against the Iron Lords.
Yeah, there was either a misunderstood command or there was just a breakdown in communication, and Rasputin let Siva go wild, and it killed most all of them.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. It took control of their weapon systems, their armor, and the Iron Lords in flesh and body themselves,
It
turning
literally
Iron Lord and
puppeteered
Iron
them.
Lord.
Yes, and this is all in a time where, because of ghosts, the Iron Lords had no concept. The Risen at Large had no concept that they could be killed.
Oh yeah. I mean,
so-
they knew that ghosts. If the ghost died, you died, but that almost never happened.
Right, because there's specific technologies that have to take out a ghost.
No, it's
Oops, we're gonna cut that.
Yeah, I can cut out pauses and bits that we don't want in there.
It's fine. We don't talk about the darkness crap.
Yeah, actually, I'm just gonna pretend that piece of lore doesn't exist because of how much it complicates shit.
It does. It was wrong research by the whatever. Moving on.
Anyways,
Sorry.
So, all of the Iron Lords died, except two: Lord Saladin and Lady Aphrodite.
the badass and badasser, Lady Aphrodite
Yes.
being the badasser.
Lady Aphrodite once threw Lord Saladin like a javelin over a mountain to take out a fallen walker as he Fist of Havoc did.
Yeah, just imagine this night-clad, just mountain of a guardian picking up Saladin, who is already massive in his own right, and chucking him
She's
over.
not. What are you talking about? She's not massive.
No. I mean Saladin.
Yeah, no. Aphrodite threw Saladin, not
Yeah.
Saladin throwing
Yeah,
Aphrodite. You got it.
Yeah, who throws Saladin, who is a massive man, over the wall into a walker while
That's
he is
man.
on lightning.
3 miles far
While he is covered in lightning.
and armor.
Now, if I was
I
an
would like to say that
alien
that's-
pirate and I saw that happen to my giant tank, I think I'd leave.
I mean,
They did die.
there's plenty of moments like these, but that's a undeniably Destiny thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
that is like some of the most
They
Destiny
were
shit
laughing
ever.
as Lord Saladin was revived. If that's not pre-Guardian behavior, I don't know what is. Unless they danced after the engagement.
Yeah. So
Emotes of it.
back to the Siva crisis. I want to say it was it hundreds or 800 of Iron Lords that went into the Plague Lands?
Yes. They fought towards the replication chamber where Ziva was being created, and the 6 of them, where they were called the Iron Wolves, as the elite of the Iron Lords, they were able to get inside the replication chamber
9.
and were fighting Ziva. But Lady Yolder made the decision to close the doors on the replication chamber and detonate it from the inside.
Yep.
And she closed the door on Saladin, and he had to watch. He couldn't stop her from ending her life, saving his. And
Yep.
after that, he buried all records of Ziva away.
So no one would ever attempt to go into the Plague Lands and find
No one would ever know. And I mean, around this time, I guess what would be considered the city was around. So they had record keeping. So we had to take that away from all of their records.
Yeah, so you get through all of this mess. Guardian on Guardian violence, regular people just trying to get to refuge, alien scavengers and pirates, and you finally get a city built, or at least the start of one, and the faction wars break out.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, what
Yep.
it was factions were created, and they kept recruiting Risen. And then, like Hip almost tried earlier, faction fights fought out between rival factions who were vying for power. Risen stayed with their factions. They fought other Risen. They weren't really doing what they needed to do. And then Fallen started to attack. And then it all was a big old mess.
Yeah, so while you have the leadership of the city in complete and total disarray with each other, the Fallen have the great idea to mount the
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
But because of the faction wars, at least, the speaker really rose to power. He was around the whole time. He was always in the city, but he kind of rose to power. He created the consensus and stopped the faction wars. And thanks to a Titan faction called the Pilgrim Guard, the fighting stopped. And this is when the name Guardian really took place. And this is where most consider the beginning of the Sitting Age, which we will cover in the next episode, because this is a very big timeline, and we will be talking here for days about it.
we still have many years to get through.
Yes. Yes, I believe the current projection of the timeline is still like 40 years before the Destiny starts.
Right. Right.
So we're going to close it here at the beginning of the Sitting Age and return next time to the City Age, and then hopefully at least get to where we start playing the game.
Yes.
So thank
This
you
has
for
been-
joining us.
Yes. This is
Thank you.
Did You Know Destiny? And now you do know. Good night.
Have a good night. All right, Guardians, that's a wrap for the first Now You Know Destiny podcast with Did You Know Destiny? We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. A couple of housekeeping notes before we go. Here's where you can catch us online. You can follow us on Twitter at DYKDestiny. You can like our page on Facebook and follow it at Did You Know Destiny. And you can follow us on Instagram at did_you_know_destiny. And also, if you're interested in any merch, we have some merch up at www.teespring.com/stores/DYKDestiny. All right, guys, that's it. Take care, Guardians.